Welcome to Buckets. I'm your host, Brandon Anderson, and this is part 2 of your NBA midseason update coming to you live from our Tommy John home studio. Folks, NFL is over. Finally, no football on a Sunday. Imagine that. No basketball either, for being honest. Many eyes on the NBA coming out of the All-Star break. Hopefully not too much from the break. Playoffs around the corner. For many of you, like me, perhaps, not Joe Dellera on our podcast, we'll get to him in a second, but many of you perhaps have been paying a little more attention to football than basketball. This is kind of that time of the year where it's like, coming out of our hibernation, what's happening in the basketball world out here? This podcast is for you and for me, frankly. This is your 2-part crash course. Get you ready to watch and bet the NBA season the rest of the way. So, part 1, already on the Buckets feed and on the Action Network podcast feed with Jim Turvey. Be sure to go back and listen to that one with Jim on the Eastern Conference. Today, part 2, heading over to the West with Joe Dellera at Joe Dellera. Joe, what's up?
Not too much, man. It's good to have you back doing a little bit of hoops. It's been a minute, dude.
It has been a minute. It is good to be back. It's good to talk some basketball. It is good to talk about real basketball and not the All-Star weekend, because that was terrible. All right, enough of that. The assignment for today for Joe and from Jim the other day. Tell me one thing I need to know about each NBA team as we come out of the All-Star break. And it's kind of up to them what they want to do with that. Is it a team trend? Is it a player prop? Just something about the team? A key thing I might miss just on like the night-to-night grind in December and January. Just like I said, a crash course, getting us up to speed. We're going to go through teams in order. Basically, if the regular season started fresh 0-0 right now after the All-Star break, how do we expect these teams to finish in the standings here forward? We're going to go worst to first. So OKC at the end, not OKC at the beginning. And we'll do some big picture stuff, some conference futures. So let's just jump right into it. We're going to do tiers as usual. Similar tiers to the one you heard from Jim Turvey on part 1. So tier 1, the just nope tier. Not sure if there's really a full nope here, but Joe, who do you got at the very bottom of the West?
So I've got the New Orleans Pelicans. They just can't stay healthy. It's really unfortunate. They're a team that, they traded Brandon Ingram now for better or for worse, right? Zion is constantly in and out of the lineup. Herb Jones, they're missing for the rest of the season. DeJounte Murray, they're missing for the rest of the season. And then you have, obviously, CJ McCollum. Maybe they start managing his minutes a little bit. He's getting a little bit older. Trey Murphy's been the dude. He's been unreal. But it's like all for naught. This team is just totally cooked. They're so far down the standings. I don't know how you can expect them to do anything besides really shoot for the top of the lottery, maybe get a Cooper Flag lottery ticket or something like that.
Yeah, I that was the one team coming to the season that I was just like, I don't know anything what to do with this team or how to bet them. And I guess I didn't know that was right. I'm just glad I stayed out of the fray. We didn't know what was coming with this team. It's kind of gross, honestly. I don't know. I am sad about Zion, and I don't feel like that's moving in any direction that NBA fans should be happy about. One other team in this tier for you, the Utah Jazz, who are trying to tank. Maybe. Are they trying to tank?
Yeah, they've been I don't know. They seem to always play up to their competition. Whether it's like Jim always talks about this, and so does our friend Andrew Connor Watts. He talks about this too. Basically, that the Jazz seem to play their starters in the matchups where they probably just should lose anyway, where, they play like in Oklahoma City, they play even like a Golden State, a team like that, where they could play their normal guys and they just lose because they're playing a better team, right? But then in the games that maybe they could lose or it would be a little bit closer, they seem to rest those guys. And it's a pretty interesting dynamic. One player that has been really, really good though has been Isaiah Collier. And since the start of February, he continues to improve. Or since the start of the new year. And then in February, especially, he's averaging almost a double-double, about 13 points and almost 10 assists a game. So he's been awesome, great for player props. And his RA has actually been popping. It hasn't adjusted as much as the assist line. So if that's an angle that you wanted to bet on a nightly basis, they play fast and they are allowing him to run the offense, which is pretty important for a rookie point guard.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't even think he was a point guard. He's a guy that I was really low on as a prospect. You and Jim both hit the group chat with the possible Isaiah Collier Rookie of the Year ticket a while back, and I just dumped all over it just as my evaluation of him. He did not have this level of passing or the assist turnover ratio that he's had. Yes, no. Do I need the Isaiah Collier Rookie of the Year ticket in the wide open field?
If you wanted one, I don't think it's crazy. To be honest with you, he's about 30 or 40. I think depending on where you shop it. I think there might be even as high as a 50-1. If you want to just sprinkle it, I don't mind. Our whole thing this year with Rookie of the Year has been building a position around all the players that we think, well, like this could be a pretty good CLV sandwich, but it is going to put us into a position where at the end of the season, if we don't have the guy that we think it's going to go to, we're going to be able to take a lot of that, expected equity and then throw it into that player at the end of the season. So we just
Yeah.
talked about that on buckets, and it's, we're always adding a guy in the Rookie of the Year portfolio this year.
Yeah, it does seem like the sort of race that you either need to feel good about the one candidate you like or hit a little bit of everyone, the Matt Moore special. And I
Yeah.
know you guys have built a good position on that. Good episode over at Buckets that just came out Monday morning from the future Jays, Jim and Joe and Matt. Next team, a little bit, just barely, I think, in the last 2 weeks, earned their way out of the bottom tier into their own tier, the low-key, not heinous group. Talk to me about the Blazers.
So the Blazers are 23-32 on the season, but since January 1st, they actually have a winning record. They're 12-1, and they are 15th in net rating. They're almost exactly a net neutral. They're minus 0.1 in terms of net rating. So the biggest thing to me is that Scoot Henderson has really taken that leap, and he's averaging 13.7 points, 5.4 assists, and 3 rebounds since January 1st. You're looking, DeAndre Ayton's probably, done for the season. He just had an injury. Imagine they're going to shut him down. Could be time for Donovan Clingan. That's definitely interesting. And to me, they're just a team that has been pretty good against the spread. They've been a little bit undervalued. They're 31-23-1 against the spread, which is the 6th best against the spread record this season. And a lot of it has really come more recently as they've had this surge. They're winning games outright against teams that you look at the schedule and go, that's an easy win, or that they should be easy, and they're not anymore. And I think the biggest thing has been Scoot, where we've seen this now with guys coming from the G League, especially like the G League Ignite. They take longer to get going, but then they can kind of cook. Jalen Green, as much as I don't think that he's a great player, he has really developed over the past, say, like season or calendar year or so to the player that he is today. And he was not even close to that before. And Scoot Henderson, brutal rookie year. Major Rookie of the Year pick, look atrocious. But now he's starting to come along. So I do think it's just the learning curve is different for some of these guys. And the Blazers have just been pretty good. Tumani Kamara has been awesome. And they're a tough team to play on a nightly basis. They're one of those teams that you just don't want to see because they're always going to play you pretty tough.
Yeah, it's interesting that those G League guys, you'd think that they should be more ready. They've been playing professional ball in the NBA, basically, so that they should have a faster learning curve. Point guards, though, in particular, from my study, have traditionally take a longer learning curve anyway. So I think that kind of checks out. I'm hearing Scoot Henderson most improved next year, maybe. That's what I'm hearing from that. Is he's kind of, we love the guys that make the leap in the second half when people aren't really paying attention. And then it just doesn't really have to, you don't have to make the leap again. You just kind of have to carry it over and keep doing the thing later. So yeah, 12-11 since January 1st. That's not terrible in the West. That really, we only have 2 teams that are just outright terrible. So let's get to our next tier. I'm going to let you introduce this tier because we enjoy our name for it.
Yeah, so we're calling this the rights to face Oklahoma City tier. There's a lot of teams competing for realistically that 9-10 spot in the seeding, and that's going to be your 8 seed probably, or maybe not. Honestly, like even if you break out of that, you really have to. You're going to be playing Oklahoma City. It's not going to be a great situation, and even if you do excel a little bit more and you're able to qualify for maybe the 7th seed, that doesn't necessarily make it too much better with a likely matchup against, Memphis or the Denver Nuggets. So I have Dallas in this tier, and I don't know if I would have had them a week ago or even right after the Luka Doncic trade. I don't think I would have had them there. I think that they are going to be pretty good when they're healthy in terms of the defense. Kyrie Irving has looked obviously great. And, people are starting to call this the Max Christie trade. Max Christie has been awesome for them since they got him. Over 17 points a game, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. Was really never coming super close to these numbers when he was on the Lakers. He had been really good over the past month and a half for them. But, obviously he's packaged in this trade for Luka Doncic. They just aren't going to have a center for the next 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks, with Anthony Davis getting hurt, Daniel Gafford getting hurt, and Derek Lively getting hurt. So the natural look has to be a PJ Washington for his rebounds. They've held him out through the All-Star break in an effort, I think, to at least get him healthy. So they have somebody that's a semblance of a big, and they're just going to ride with the small lineup. It could be good for the playoffs if they are able to figure out some small ball lineups that work. But I do struggle with them over the course of the regular season. This is going to be very, very difficult for this team to kind of excel. Like, I know they've surprised and stayed alive without Luka Doncic. They've also had centers, and then you go and get Anthony Davis. It's just it feels like bad vibes there. And I struggle to see how Dallas is going to stay afloat in the Western Conference. They have some room to work with because of their current record, but I could definitely see the bottom falling out real quick if they aren't able to get anybody healthy soon.
Yeah, is that Dwight Powell's music? Dwight Powell's still making a living out here playing center for the Mavericks. I think I saw, it was a trivia my friends and I did. I believe it's just like him, Steph, Draymond, I forget, like 2 other dudes that have been with their current team for a decade. Dwight Powell, just like the cockroach of the NBA, still hanging around.
And the sneaky little detail there is they don't even have Maxi Kleba anymore because Maxi Kleba was in the Luka Doncic trade.
Salary needed.
So they don't even have him, and he's not a great big, but he's a big. He's another body. They don't even have him. So really tough, I think, for Dallas right now moving forward.
Yeah, and just to be clear on the numbers here, just on the setup, you kind of get into this, but we only have 3 teams below this in the West that are clearly below. The Blazers are not going to get enough into this mix, I don't think, and obviously the teams below that. So that means this is 5 teams in this tier, so 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. 4 of those 5 teams, assuming that this tier is right, teams 9 and below literally cannot be anything but the 8 seed. That is the best possible outcome for them. If you're not 7 or 8 when the regular season ends, you can't be anything better than the 8 seed. You got to win 2 play-in games just to get to the right to play Oklahoma City. And the Mavericks are coming in at number 12 for us on this list. That's not great. And obviously, some of these teams like Dallas, Golden State, Lakers, some of these teams, frankly, for me, for the listener coming in with what's been happening the rest of the season, well, not super relevant because Luka is gone and all the data we have from the year, not really particularly important going forward. One team that didn't really make changes that we thought was going to, Phoenix Suns. They're next on your list.
Yeah, they couldn't get off the Bradley Beal contract. They were trying their darndest to get Jimmy Butler over there, and they just couldn't make a deal happen. I know that they made that one trade where, they traded 1 first-round pick for 3 first-round picks of lesser quality, or so to speak, and they still couldn't really get too much done. I liked the acquisition of Nick Richards. I thought that was a smart move. I thought that was a good move, but at the same time, that's not a needle-moving move. And Bol has been surprisingly good, but at the same time, this is a team that has Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal, and they're still below 500 right now. They've basically demoted Bradley Beal from the starting lineup in an effort to try to get him to waive his no trade clause, and he wouldn't do it. They're below 500. They couldn't really add anybody. And regardless of how you look at this is a team that doesn't really have a lot of options right now. They can't really get anybody in the buyout market. They don't have a lot of options still left. And then the free agent acquisitions that they made, they bring in Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones is barely even playing. He plays 20-ish minutes a night, and our expectation at the beginning of the year was, this is going to be great. He doesn't turn the ball over. He can help run the offense. It'll make this team a lot better. And then they're not really doing that. So unless there's a major change here, and I think we gave Budenholzer maybe a little bit too much credit, that it's not I just don't see what the upside is for this team. Obviously they can beat anybody. They can contend with anybody when you have Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, but we've seen this formula before, and they have to be perfect in order for that to work. because they're taking a lot of twos, and it's a math problem. And they're a little bit older. As good as they both are, I don't know if the rest of this team is really good enough to help move the Suns forward through the rest of the season.
Yeah, this is a tough one. This to me is probably my biggest miss as far as preseason futures go. So last episode with Jim, I talked about, okay, I've got my position on Kenny Atkinson for Coach of the Year, 30-1. Do I need the hedge? Well, I made 2 bets, and Coach Bud was the other one. And in the world where I really paid attention to the NBA for like 2 weeks to start the year, I'm looking right now, the Suns started out 8-1. I was like, yes, Coach Bud, got the ticket. Let's go. I had Suns Warriors dual forecast on the division. Warriors were looking great early. I'm feeling really good. And then it just has totally fallen apart. And right now, it feels to me like they don't even really want to tank. Like you said, they don't have their picks to do much with anyway. It just feels like they're one rolled ankle or hammy or something from either Booker or Durant from this just like totally crumbling and falling out of the mix. To me, instinctively, they just scream, we're not even in the play-in this year. And I feel like it could head that direction. A team that I wish would head that direction, frankly, are the Sacramento Kings. Tell me about the Kings.
You mean the Bulls West, right?
Exactly.
They bring back this pairing of DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. And I've talked about this before, but like, I don't understand the combination. The combination just hasn't worked. People go, oh, well, it worked the first year, but it's like, that was literally like 3-4 years ago before Lonzo got hurt. It did work, right? And now these players are older. They played together. We've seen a bigger sample size. It doesn't work. The meshing doesn't really work well. On the other side of this is you had a player in De'Aaron Fox that wanted out, and you bring in Zach LaVine from a talent perspective. That's not a bad swap. So I do think that they're okay. I think they're going to float around there. They're just going to be that maybe they'll be the 10 seed or like the 11. They're not going to fall all the way out. I think the floor is too high. And they added Markelle Fultz, who's a decent add, given that they kind of need another ball handler, a little bit of a facilitator. So they're going to be there. They're going to be a nuisance, but they're never going to make any real noise in the West.
Yeah, they're a nuisance to me as a fan. Like exactly what the Bulls were in the East all the years of the play. It's like nobody wants to watch the Kings in the play-in when I could have watched the Warriors, when I could have watched the Spurs, I could have watched the Suns. Given the options, I just don't. Nobody's picking the Kings in that mix. I just mentioned the Warriors. They're next on your list.
Yeah, so I think that the early returns with Jimmy Butler are good. From a basketball fit perspective, it's a little odd seeing Quentin Post getting so many minutes out there.
Yeah, sure
so that's a little weird, but I think that the returns are good. Jimmy's a super high IQ player, and he's played very well, I think, with Draymond and with Curry, and that's the thing that matters, right? And the concern is obviously that's not a lot of shooting to have out there between Draymond and Jimmy. But Jimmy's a guy that helps them with their free throw rate. Golden State just does not get to the free throw line. They don't have any breaks in play. It's hard, I think, to disrupt an opposing team's rhythm outside of the flurry of threes that they had, which they don't really have this year because the only guy has been Curry. Buddy Hield is a little bit too inconsistent. He struggled to kind of thrive, or so to speak, with Golden State outside of a random game here or there where he'll make 6 or 7 threes. And Jimmy gets to the free throw line. He generates some of those tougher buckets. He's another guy that can create from the interior. And I think that that's super important. The on-court numbers aren't great yet, but it's also only been like a 3-game sample size. So I think you just have to throw that out the window and say, when you look at this, it makes sense basketball-wise. I just don't know if it makes them title contenders or if it makes them maybe like a very tough first or second round out. I think that they're going to get through. I think they'll be in the play-in. I think they'll probably get through the play-in, but I don't know if they can actually make any real noise in the Western Conference, especially if that first matchup is against like an Oklahoma City or a Denver.
Yeah, I mean, this is slanderous because these are players that I love, but the play-in has sort of become Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler's specialty. Like, that's sort of where these dudes have lived for the last few years. And I think in this group, to me, of the teams on this tier, my question for you is this. If the Warriors could get above this tier just by one spot and get themselves out of the 8, they're going to get demolished if they play Oklahoma City. Get out of the 8, get to the 7 seed, win your first play-in game, get to the 7, and let's call it not Denver. Let's paint the world that we've seen where Denver ends up in the 4 or 5, and Denver OKC are on the other side of the bracket. And we've seen this in the West. We saw it in the East a little bit too last year. Could Golden State, Draymond just made headlines this weekend, as always, saying that the Warriors are going to win the championship. I don't think so. But could they be the team that makes the surprise run to the conference finals if they get the right path, assuming the right path is not OKC?
I think they would just need a lot. Like they would need so much because basically they would have to have the 2-3 be Memphis, who I don't think that they can beat, and probably Houston, who I think they could maybe beat because they've beaten Houston a lot over the past couple of seasons, right? So that's what they would have to have. It would have to be the perfect draw, and I don't know if I really see it. I struggle with this Golden State Warriors team. They have all the name equity, right? In Curry, Jimmy Butler, these guys that can Draymond Green, these guys that can pull things out of nowhere, but I just don't know if they have that gear anymore. And I know that Jimmy's motivated, but at the same time, Jimmy still just got paid. So like, I think that he's going to try. I think that this year should probably be okay, but they still have a lot of work to do. They have a lot of ground to make up. And as good as I think the basketball fit has been so far, it's very tough to assimilate a player that's as polarizing as Jimmy Butler in the last like 30 games of the season.
Yeah, I think this feels to me like a team that I would look at a long shot ticket on a in-season tournament that were happening in the next 2 months, like the one-offs where you just need to win like 6 games. Okay, sure. Maybe I can paint the picture then. I think it's asking a little bit much. I'm surprised but intrigued by your last team in this tier because, again, last is best. So of this 8 to 12 group, you had above the Warriors, above the Suns, above the Mavs, above the Kings, whatever, the San Antonio Spurs. You have as number 8, middle of the West. Tell me about the Spurs.
So the Spurs are technically like lowest really in this tier coming in terms of record, but their defense has been like rocky. They're 28th in defense on cleaning the glass since January 1st, but their adjusted defense on the season is 17th. So that's a little bit more middle of the road here. I think that the Fox inclusion was almost a zero cost upgrade because they didn't have to trade Vassell. They didn't have to trade Sohan. They were able to keep most of the players like around Wemby that they wanted to. And to me, this was a strong move. Fox is a plus 19.4 in 179 minutes. Like it's insane. It's absolutely insane. I think 179 possessions. I'm sorry. But either way, he's been insane. And I think that is going to help elevate them. That was just a clear plug and play. Like Chris Paul's getting a little older. I think Chris Paul's been really good, but I think at this point, you have to say that De'Aaron Fox is a bit of an upgrade to Chris Paul, just in terms of what they can do on court. And it also helps, I think, further down where you don't have minutes where there's no primary ball handler on the floor. You're going to always have either one of De'Aaron Fox or Chris Paul on the court. And I think that helps stabilize the team. You're also seeing Stephon Castle get a little bit more run where he doesn't even have to really run the offense every time down the court. There can be possessions where Fox plays a little bit off ball or Chris Paul plays off ball and Stephon Castle can start facilitating the offense. And it gives a different look for San Antonio. So I think when you couple it with that, I was shocked by this. On the season, with a minimum of 250 possessions, the Spurs have 3 different lineups in the top 12 on cleaning the glass. So I think they're a team that can beat anybody. They're a little bit of a matchup problem for a lot of different teams because you have guys like Victor Wembanyama. And if they see this expansion in their minutes, right, where say if you're in the playoffs and Wemby starts playing 35 plus or 40 minutes a game, what does that do? Or if Fox is playing 40 minutes or, Vassell or Castle, these guys start playing a lot more minutes, it kind of changes what the ceiling can be for this team. So I like them. I think that Castle is a very live rookie of the year candidate. He's the clear favorite right now. We talked about this a little bit more on the Future Jays episode of Buckets, but to me, the Spurs have the highest ceiling, and we've seen Wemby just like the growth is exponential. So every time there seems to be a division, you go, man, he's a lot better than he was like 3 months ago. He's a lot better than he was at this point. Even if you look a year ago from today, he's significantly better than he was then. So I think that this is a team that has untapped potential, whereas a lot of the teams that we just talked about before, I think that, like, we're trying to say these guys have to reach back into something that they had,
Right.
whereas the Spurs have to grow into what they still could be.
Yeah, I like that a lot. My fear is there enough time? Are there enough games left for the Spurs to close ground? Because, like you said, they start at the bottom of this tier and
Yeah.
by not a small margin either right now. Like looking at the standings right now, where are the
It's
Spurs
only
at?
it's only 3 losses though to the Mavericks. So they have a lot fewer
Sure, you're
wins.
right. By the losses, yeah, they need to get the wins. They are 7 wins behind the Mavericks, but only 3 losses behind. So
Yeah.
you're right. They do have some chances to get wins. Here's my. I'm just gonna throw a future out for you here. This is one I know you just talked about in the Buckets episode as well with Matt and Jim. I think even Matt thinks that the Defensive Player of the Year award is over. I think if the Spurs don't make the push you're expecting here and do end up outside the play-in, which I do think is their most likely scenario, given that they are 7 wins back of the 8 seed right now. If they don't, and if you're right, and you are right, that the numbers defensively are not great for the team, like they are below average, even on the adjusted for the whole season. To me, I got this one way wrong. I thought Wemby's been better offensively already than I thought he would get to this year, but he's been way less impactful defensively. I do not think Wembanyama Defensive Player of the Year is cooked. I think that if the Spurs don't make the push that we want them to, if they don't make it into at least the play-in, he's being priced right now at like minus 2,500, minus 3,500 for Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know who the position is. It's probably just the next two guys, Jaren Jackson, Evan Mobley. You can basically bet both of those two together for like 15-1 right now. I just think maybe no one's going to do the work and we're just going to crown Wemby and he's going to have all the stocks. But if you do any of the work and it's a bad team that didn't make the play-in, that's not even playing, like Defensive Player of the Year goes to a top 5, usually top 3 defensive team. This is not a top half of the league defensive team, and one that, like you said, is playing bottom 3 defense. And that is also part of the Fox thing too, potentially. So that to me just is a number that I'm willing to take a shot on to possibly be wrong on. I know you kind of feel similarly just on that position. Is there somebody else besides Jackson or Mobley that I would need to add to that position? Because I don't see other names. It should be a Thunder, but neither one of the guys from the Thunder that it should be have played enough games. So I don't know who else is on the list that would need to add. Is there somebody?
No, those are the 2 guys that I would want. I just think I'm kind of at the point where I think it might be cooked just because there's media that are just saying it's going to be Wemby. Like if you like if you listen to the Hoop Collective, like Windhorst, Bontemps, McMahon, like they're all just like, yeah, no, it's Wemby. And it's like it's a foregone conclusion. The other problem that I have with it is I think Jaren's better than Mobley, but I don't think it's that far apart, right? And this requires 2 things. It requires
one to separate from the other.
Exactly. And they could coalesce and say, okay, well, like it's not going to be Victor, but Victor could still win on a plurality then at that point, where if Victor gets a third and then Jackson and Mobley each get, like a third or whatever. So then it gets close and then people are going to go, well, I'm not going to put Victor that far down. I don't know if he should win, but I think he should be second. And I think it's going to, I just feel like we're asking for a lot of things to happen in order for it to not be him. And like, even though I think, the other 2 should win, the problem is when we look at even the adjusted defensive rankings, Memphis is 7th and Cleveland is 9th. So they're top 10, but they're not 1. So like, it's not like we're saying, like let's say Isaiah Hartenstein had played enough games. So like, it's not Isaiah Hartenstein because he's on the Thunder and they're number 1, where you'd say, well, they have literally the best defense in the league, or Chet Holmgren, if he was healthy. We're looking at guys that are 7th and 9th. And San Antonio is not great, but they're 17th. So I think it's the margin's not as far as it normally would be in like a different year.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That you're not going from 17th to 1st. OKC with the transcendent defense that is breaking the numbers should be the team that has it, but then we don't know who it is, as it doesn't seem like it's one of the wings or guards. No. Probably it's supposed to be Chet, but then he missed like 2 months of the numbers that they have so great. So yeah, to me, we'll leave it there. I just feel like it's we got 2 months to fill airtime with in the media and on TV shows and podcasts. There's going to be an anti-Wemby for Defensive
Yeah.
Player of the Year movement sometime along the way. Bill Simmons or somebody on a podcast is going to start we need to have a conversation. And when that happens, we've seen it in the odds. Those odds are going to shorten and shrink toward each other. And I think you can even if you have to buy Wemby at a minus something number still, maybe be able to still kind of get both sides of things at that point. All right, let's keep moving. Our good, not great tier. We've got in this group the Timberwolves and the Rockets. Start with the Timberwolves.
Yeah, so Julius Randle's hurt right now for better or for worse for this team. It means that you're seeing a lot more Naz Reid minutes, which I think is a good thing. That's been something that's beneficial to this team. And they're 8th in adjusted net. They're 5th in defense. So they're still a solid basketball team. Rudy Gobert is still very much that dude defensively. He has been incredible. He's actually got the #1 rim deterrent rate in the NBA. It's not Wemby, it's Rudy, which is like one of those stats you go, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. That's good to know. And I just think that the offense definitely still misses Karl Anthony Towns to a degree. They make this big trade, and then you lose out on this guy who's going bonkers in New York, right? And I think that this team is obviously very, very well coached, and that's what makes the difference, especially during the regular season. And the one thing that we have seen with Rudy Gobert, as much as people want to give him shit, is that he is a clear anchor to a top 10 defense. Like every year, without fail, you are getting a top 10 defense with Rudy Gobert as the centerpiece, right? And in the regular season, I think that works. And I think that makes you very good. But I don't know if it makes you great, because the thing is here, they've held up decently against teams in the top 10. Since January 1st, they're plus 4.4 in terms of point differential, which is solid. It's a top 10. It's above a top 10 ranking in the NBA. The problem is that their offense in those games is 122.9, which to me seems extremely unsustainable for a Timberwolves team who has not been good offensively over the course of the season. And if we look at their adjusted net rating, they're 13th, which is they're about average, right? So to see them take that big leap forward in these games against top 10 teams, I think that that's unsustainable over the course of the entire season, especially in the postseason. So, it's hard to count them out because you have a guy like Anthony Edwards who has shown that he can elevate his game at the highest stages, at the highest levels. But I don't think they have that much else besides him. I think that Naz Reid is good. I think that Jaden McDaniels has taken steps forward. He's been great, especially his rebounds market has been solid. It's something that we've been betting and making a lot of money on. But I don't think that they have that extra gear right now. And I think that when they had Karl Anthony Towns, they did, because they had another elite offensive option. And right now they don't have that. And in the playoffs, where you can really zero in and focus on Anthony Edwards, I just don't know if it's there anymore, especially because Conley seems to be showing his age like more and more as the year progresses.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we know what I think about the Timberwolves. Another team that maybe folks are not expecting to be this low, given where the standings have been this season. The Rockets have really been in that kind of 2-3 seed range most of the year. You're not sold on Houston.
No, so Houston's kind of fallen off a bit since January 1st. They're 13-10, which is fine, but they're just 13th in point differential at plus 1.2. So it's definitely a downturn. And I'm not sold on them. I don't think that they have a clear 1A. And that's been my major problem with Houston, like basically the entire season, coming into the offseason, whatever. And, they made they've made a couple moves in the offseason. They extended Alperen Şengün and gave him the full rookie max. And they also gave Jalen Green like a different rookie max, right? They gave him the 3-year one because they weren't really sure what they had. And I think we still can say we're not really sure what you have. And it's clearly an issue as well that Fred VanVleet definitely matters. I think he helps stabilize the team. I think the defense is a little bit underrated, and he's been super important for this rotation. When he comes back, because he's been missing some time, Amen Thompson has taken a leap. And I think that it's obvious that he is very good. He's probably going to be very good for a long time. He is, I think you said it, he's the Ben Simmons that was promised. And like when Fred VanVleet comes back, does Amen go back to the bench? And that's probably a net negative. I don't think that would be a good thing. So I think they have almost too many dudes and not enough clarity on who is going to be in charge of this team.
Hmm.
They're very deep. They're a team that to me was dying for a consolidation trade and they didn't do it. As good as they've been, when you get into the playoffs, having roster flexibility and positional like options in terms of your rotation, I think is very, very important. But I also think that it's a problem where they don't have somebody that I think you can give the ball to and say, we need a bucket, go get it. And, like when things break down, as much as we hate ISO ball, and I don't think that ISO ball is really going to be fruitful if you have to do it nonstop throughout the entire postseason, there are times where you need that. And there are circumstances where you say, we got to stop this run. We got to stop the bleed. We got to give the ball to Kevin Durant. We got to give the ball to Shea. We got to give the ball to Ja. And I don't think Houston has that. So they're sliding right now. I think that they're going to have some issues even when they bring players back as they start to try to figure out what exactly is the playoff rotation. And Turvey was on it first, but to miss the playoffs is 20-1. If they fall into the play-in, which is not completely unreasonable when we look at what the standings are, they're 34-21. To fall into the play-in, they're 4 losses ahead of Minnesota. I don't think it's crazy that they fall into the play-in. And if they fall into the play-in, I know that teams, if they've been the 7 seed, I think they've made it every single time, right, this year, or since the play-in started.
Yeah.
This play-in is still filled with a lot of really, really tough teams.
All those teams we just talked about, they got to beat 2 of those potentially, or they need to beat 1 of them in 2 home games, but it's not going to be easy home games.
No. So especially when my concern is that they don't have a number 1 guy. And a lot of times you need that in those types of situations. So I think that's the way that I would go. I'd be fading Houston. I think they've been a great story. I wish they made a big splash at the deadline and, push the chips in for somebody. This is too deep of a rotation for me. And I think it's great in the regular season. I don't think it's going to be a benefit to them in like a postseason setting. So if they can't figure it out between now and the end of the season, it's not crazy to see them dropping 4 games in the loss column and slipping into this play-in situation.
Yeah, they remind me of like Oklahoma City or Memphis in recent years. They're just that young team that's exciting, that's like really good all regular season, that's deep. So you're getting all the regular season benefits of your deep roster and your youth and the energy. But they're also the team that we're like, come on, it's right there. Just make one move, one consolidation trade. And like, yeah, that's not how NBA GMs tend to play the game. We want fantasy basketball. We want them to just go for it. And any of the Rockets, like these other younger teams, are kind of playing the longer game. Difference is, in this case, well, okay, you're sort of waiting out LeBron and Steph and some of these guys, but you're waiting in Wembanyama and whatever OKC is building up to. So I don't know if there's really going to be a gap for them. We will see. We're in our top 5 now. Our next tier are just 2 teams, and they are the LA teams. So which of the 2 LA teams do you have lower in the tier?
So I have the Lakers lower. I really struggled on where exactly to put the Lakers because bringing in Luka Doncic is a move. It's literally like one of the biggest moves that's happened in the last probably like 25 years in the NBA, right? And they're doing it mid-season, and you're pairing him with LeBron James. So incredible, right? They don't have a lot of bigs, and I struggle with that. But at the same time, and you had talked about this when we did the reaction pod, if you have Luka and LeBron, like who are you like, you'll take your chances with them against pretty much anybody. So I do think that they're a team that they have enough of a head start right now that they're going to be in a good situation. I think that they're going to be able to stick, even if they fall into the play-in, they're still going to have LeBron and Luka in a 1-game setting. Like I'll take that any day against anybody. The other thing is, since January 1st, it's a little bit skewed because, Anthony Davis isn't on the team anymore, but second best in point differential, and against top 10 teams, they're 3-3 in that. So they were second best in point differential against top 10 teams with a plus 6.9 point differential. I think that they play up to their competition. They really show out. And the other thing is, I think the offense, the geometry on the floor is going to change a little bit. Jackson Hayes is going to be getting 1 million lobs. Jackson Hayes is going to make so much more money because of Luka Doncic. Yeah. It's unfathomable, right? I don't know how great they're going to be this season, but again, like I'm willing to back them because of that combination of players between Luka and
Yeah.
LeBron. And the way the geometry on the court is going to change is because you have two different players that can facilitate, and then they can also kind of spot up when they need to. Everybody's going to take a lot more threes. I think that that's going to be the thing that's unlocked with this roster. You're going to see a lot more threes for Austin Reeves. You're going to see more threes, I think, for Luka. You're going to see a lot of threes for Gabe Vincent, Dorian Finney-Smith. And that's the swing that I think Los Angeles is going to have. It's one of the complaints. LeBron didn't really say it outright, and JJ didn't really say it completely outright. But when you play with an offense that's really centered on Anthony Davis and LeBron James attacking the paint, attacking the rim, you're not taking a lot of threes. And the threes are all basically drive and kick, which isn't, it can work, but it's not always the best, right? Now, because you have two different facilitators, LeBron can drive and kick to Luka, and then Luka can find somebody else on the perimeter. He can drive and kick and do this cycle over and over and over again. I think the offense is going to be a little bit more fluid. I'm higher on the fact that they can jack up the variance in a way that they couldn't do it before. And I think that that helps them with their ceiling moving forward as well.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Certainly, there'll be plenty of Lakers talk over in the Buckets feed every day, every week going forward. Plenty of Luka and LeBron. A team that I did not think we'd be talking about, certainly this late in the podcast. I don't really think we'd be saying much about this team at all this season. I thought the Clippers were a sub 500 team. They, to me, were one of the teams that I was expecting to just kind of be out of the mix of things so that we could have some of the more interesting teams. And here they are, number 4 in your list, really. Why do I need to pay attention to the Clippers? It seems like this late in the season, I must have to pay attention to this.
Yeah, I mean, they've just been sneaky good. They're 9th best in adjusted net, and they're 2nd in defense. I bet you didn't have that one on your bingo card, right? And that's with Kawhi missing a lot of time. So the offense is just not good, though. Offense is 21st. No. Getting Kawhi back and ramped up, I think, will automatically help the offense. And then they get Ben Simmons in the buyout market. I don't think Ben Simmons is particularly good, but I also think that Ben Simmons, when healthy, has shown that he can be like a little bit of a contributing player, especially in terms of facilitating. If you're able to put him out there and give Harden a little bit of a break, and I think it helps them maybe switching if they have to. If there's a rotation or there's a lineup that Zoo isn't going to be a good fit in because he basically has to play a drop, and you need to run maybe a slightly bigger lineup and you play Simmons at like the 4 or 5. I think that that's helpful. It gives them a little bit more flexibility there. It gives them a little bit more size. So I think they're a pretty dangerous team, and they have the 2nd best lineup of out of the lineups that have played 250 possessions or more together. James Harden, Norman Powell, Kawhi Leonard, Derrick Jones Jr., and Zoo are plus 25.7. So this is a team that has a lot of vets. I think that having Kawhi there and Norman Powell has really taken the step forward, right? Where he's been better. He's just been flat out better than Paul George this year. And they haven't really seen a downturn from that. I think this is a team that you have to watch out for. They're going to be a major problem if you have a healthy Kawhi. And that's always the question. Is Kawhi healthy? I'm not super concerned about path for this team. I think that they are, like, if they're healthy, they can contend with anybody, but you have to have Kawhi. And they're 18-1 to win the West. I don't know how I would feel if they had to play a team in the Eastern Conference. And I feel like I've spent so much money on the Clippers in prior years that I'm a little bit gun shy at the same time. But I think I might just wait and see what. I don't think the number is going to move too much between now and the start of the playoffs. And even if it does, let's say it moves down to maybe like 15-1, but I know Kawhi's healthy and I see maybe they have actually a great path. That's definitely a team I'm going to be wanting to back. And I think on a nightly basis, they're pretty good to back because they're still somehow like a little bit underrated, I think, because of the stigma around the team going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, Kawhi turns into Michael Jordan when he's actually healthy in the playoffs. He's never healthy, but when we get it like twice a decade, then they make a title run. And so it's like, this is a level above even like the Warriors thing, because this is not Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler has had incredible playoff runs. Kawhi Leonard is something else entirely if we ever still get that tapped into. I don't know if it's there, but we have to respect the possibility that it's there. Not saying, just saying, while you're just talking, I looked it up. Ivica Zubac is 250-1 defensive player of the year. Just saying.
He's been awesome.
It's
Yeah.
never going to happen. He does not have the attention in the media, but, seems to me like he will make my first team all defense when I get there. All right, top 3 teams. We know these teams. You call this the bounce back stronger tier. The Denver Nuggets finally making their push, it seems like.
Yeah, they've been awesome. I hope they don't make that push the same way that they did last year,
Hmm.
where I think they kind of sold out to try to get the better record, and then I think they were just burned out. But this year they're 5th in adjusted net, 2nd in offense, 18th in defense, exactly what you'd expect from this Denver Nuggets team. The big thing to me is Christian Brown's been amazing. Julian Strother's been popping. Peyton Watson's been really good. But Russell Westbrook has been resurgent for this team. And we gave out that one future. What was it? It was
13,
6
6, and 6 at 55-1. We are in it, Joe. We are in it.
We are close to that. So they've been dynamic. They have the second best 5-man lineup in the league. This is with 500 possessions, so bigger sample size. I had to scale it down last when we were with the Clippers because Kawhi didn't pop in anything because he doesn't play. But out of 500 possessions, because this is a lineup that is playing, but it's Murray, Brown, MPJ, Gordon, and Jokic. Pinch me if you've heard that before, right? So this team is still really good. The path is going to be good because I don't think they're going to fall out of the 2-3. I don't think they're going to have to play Oklahoma City in like the second round, right? And based on the way the standings are, if the season finished right now, you'd be getting a matchup against like the Clippers or maybe even the Timberwolves, right? Right now it would be the Clippers, but I think that they match up pretty well against a lot of those teams. And I think, especially if they're able to jump into the 2 and they're starting to face more of these teams that are in the play-in, where you're looking at Minnesota, Dallas, Sacramento, Golden State, they're going to match up very, very well with all of those teams. So I like Denver a lot. I think that they're very good. I don't know if I need to buy them in terms of the futures market though. Their odds to win the West are only like plus 650 at the high, and their odds to win the title are 14-15-1. I think that number probably doesn't. Again, I think that the favorites are almost so high that it's hard to see a lot of these numbers moving too dramatically. So I'm okay with waiting, seeing where they end up, and then saying like, all right, I like the path for this Denver team, and they're a team that I'm definitely willing to bet on. The other thing is with Jokic, this season has been transcendent for him, and the triple doubles have just been popping. And it's a bet that you can definitely look at. I think that you almost have to look at it and try to shop it. Some days it's better to bet just over 9.5 assists. Other days it's better to bet like the RA. Other days it's better to just bet triple double. So he's somebody that on a nightly basis is just putting up these monster numbers. And, I think that he's still alive for MVP.
Yeah, a lot of MVP talk over on Buckets. Make sure to follow Joe at Joe Dellera on Twitter and also in the Action app. A lot of these bets are popping. The RA rebounds assist bet, the manual triple double bet. You got to shop around. Good way to shop around. Just follow Joe in the app, and he usually does the shopping for you and just kind of tail the bet. But you got to do it fast. Get the pro account because once that goes in the app, folks are tailing us, Joe, and especially when we get some of these long shots, they are not sticking around long. All right, number 2 on the list, the Memphis Grizzlies, a team that is very high on this list despite not really even playing a ton of minutes on their top guys, it seems like.
Yeah, they're the best team against the spread this season at 35-19. So they've been incredible. They haven't been great against top teams this season. That's my concern. They're 6-10, minus 6.4 in terms of their net rating. The reason I think that there's some room to change from that, though, is they're almost the anti-Tibbs team. They have basically nobody playing more than 30 minutes a game. The only player on the roster averaging more than 30 points a game is Desmond Bane, and it's barely. He's at 30.5. So they have 16 players averaging over 12 minutes per game. That's impossible, right? But it's because of players being in, players being out. They've had to deal with a lot of injuries, players missing time, players getting rest. But as a result, I think that this team has a lot of room to scale up for the playoffs. And that is, I think, one of the most important details here for this Grizzlies team moving forward. Maybe they start expanding these rotations a little bit where he's saying, all right, well, we need to get Ja, Bane, Jaren. We need to get their minutes up. We got to get them into the mid-30s over the stretch run of the season. So that way they're ready to go play 40 plus minutes a game in the postseason. So I think there's a lot of room to grow there. They have the best 5-man lineup of 250 possessions or more in Ja, Bane, Wells, JJJ, and Edey. plus 33.7. They are dynamic. They're 12-1 to win the West on Caesars, 33-1 to win the title on ESPN. Honestly, I think that they're both reasonable bets. I think this is a really, really strong team. I don't think they're going to fall out of the 2 or the 3. The defense is there, the offense is there, and I think that they only have more room to really grow because of the minutes that they can start seeing their best players like expand. They can see the minutes expanding for their best players as the season continues, as opposed to trying to scale down and say like these guys have been playing too much. There's not as much more ceiling. There is a lot of ceiling left for this Memphis Grizzlies team.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can kind of talk myself into both ways. Like Jaren Jackson has taken a leap. Like as a guy that's followed him from scouting in college and forward, man, he just looks like a totally different player this year. At the same time, I don't see it with Zach Edey. I want to see it with Zach Edey. I don't feel like he belongs out there just on an NBA court as a starter, let alone on a like top 5 contender like Memphis is being priced as. And so can they ramp up? Can they scale up? They have 3 guys. I want more minutes from Ja and Bane and Jaren, but like, who are the other guys? And I know like you just have the stat on the lineup, but that's like a regular season stat. And will that hold up when you have 2 rookies from your starting lineup in a playoff matchup? Maybe the first round, but like we said, even in the first round, we've got some tough teams coming up. So I don't know. I can get there either side of them. And really the big question in the West is just the Thunder. Are you in on the Thunder or not? Because the numbers are insane. By the numbers right now at the All-Star break, this is one of the greatest regular season teams we've ever seen. And it's not even the team that we've seen. They've been missing one of their key defenders pretty much the entire season, and they're still this incredible.
Yeah, I do think, and we'll talk about we can get to the Thunder in a sec. I just do think if there was a team that maybe had to pair up, Memphis matches up, I think, decently personnel wise against Oklahoma City in terms of their size, their switchability, what have you. But I do think Oklahoma City is the clear favorite in the Western Conference. They are the best team against top 10 teams. Since January 1st, they're 6-4 plus 10.3 net rating, by far the best number. They have the best 5-man lineup in the NBA with 500 plus possessions. That's a huge sample size. That lineup doesn't even have Chet in it because Chet's missed so much time. So they have 2 centers that are incredible defensively in Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein, and they both can play off of each other. We've seen them play Chet now at the 4, and I think we're going to see a lot of times where, depending on the matchup, you only need one of them on the floor. So they're going to be deep. This is a team where Shea has been unbelievable. He's been everything that you could ask for out of a superstar, and he's shown it. And then Jalen Williams, I think, has been good. I don't know if he's been as good as we thought he was going to be this season, but he's definitely taken a step forward. And they have so many different options in terms on the roster. As you go further down, it's like, oh my gosh, they have another wing. They got another player. They have another this. They have another that. So getting off of Giddey and bringing in some other wings that better suit what Oklahoma City wants to do, putting the ball in their best players' hands, has been transcendent for Oklahoma City. They are definitely the team to beat. And the way that the West is kind of shaping up, if you don't have to play Denver in the first round or the second round, that is the winning formula, I think, for Oklahoma City. I think that they could struggle still. As good as Hartenstein is, as good as Chet is, I think that you could still struggle if you have to go play Jokic, just based on the size and what he brings to the table. Because overall, Denver is a huge team. And Oklahoma City, even with the dual bigs, they're not like the biggest bigs, right? So I think that's the concern. Yeah. But from a regular season perspective, this team is just massacring their opposition. And the fact that the way that they run their rotations with Shea basically playing the entire first quarter, entire third quarter, it does make his player props a little bit more bettable, or so to speak. A lot of times it caps the ceiling because they're blowing teams out and he doesn't even play in the fourth quarter, but he is always consistently getting to at least 25 points, if not 30 on a nightly basis.
Yeah, I mean, the Thunder definitely make things very interesting in the West because looking at like when Jim and I got through the East in part 1, to make sure to listen on if you haven't yet, we basically kind of whittled it down to like, okay, well, really the East just has 3 teams. There's 3 teams going to compete in the Eastern Conference Finals, and one of those 3 teams comes out, and we go from there. In the West, we can have like 12 teams that we think are like maybe legitimately could at least win a series if they got a chance to get in. And I think the fascinating question is, by all the metrics, by all the numbers, by everything you just said, the Thunder should be so well regarded that they should be like the West should have a 3 or a 1, maybe. Just maybe the Thunder are a 1 and everyone else just isn't good enough and they're that good. But it doesn't feel like we're giving them that respect because we're kind of just being like, well, everything is open and it's the right matchup. It has been a thing too with the East where it's like, okay, these 3 are just the best. In the West, it's so matchup dependent, which makes it hard to bet, makes it fun to bet because you can kind of like, especially as you get closer, set up the bracket in your mind and where things going. And this path sets up well. And again, we've seen that in the West. We saw, Steph and LeBron got the second round series when the 6 and 7 seeds kind of lined up against the softer half of the bracket. And again, there are possibilities here where it's like, okay, what if last year we saw Oklahoma City couldn't get by Dallas, and even still pre-Luka trade, Dallas seemed to have Oklahoma City's number. There's just something about that matchup that wasn't working as good as OKC is. Well, maybe that's Denver this year, or is there a different version of that? And is there something like that for Denver? Do they have a kryptonite? We saw Minnesota take them down last year. Is there some team that can knock Denver out, and now Oklahoma City is safer because of that? You kind of do the chicken egg, the before and after sort of thing. But I think that's what makes the West really interesting. So let's do some big picture and some futures questions here. A little lightning round, just sort of wrap up. So I gave some questions for you just before the podcast. Question number one division, the Thunder division. We're done. We're done here. The Thunder have won the division. What is the parlay that you're going to make on the Pacific Division? That's like all the California teams, Lakers, Clippers, Kings, etc. And the Southwest. What's the Pacific Southwest Division parlay bet to make right now?
I think it's Clippers Grizzlies. I'm very high on the Clippers. I think the floor is there regardless of whether Kawhi is healthy or not. And I'm a little concerned, even though the Lakers have a slight step ahead of them right now, that it might take them a little bit of time to coalesce and kind of gel together with Luka and LeBron. And then I think with Memphis, as I just talked about, they have a lot more room to really press their foot on the pedal. Whereas I think that Houston is starting to regress a little bit. And Dallas obviously is now going to going through all their injury issues. So I like the idea of adding the Grizzlies there and to the Los Angeles Clippers at about 3-1 to win the Pacific.
Yeah, I think I definitely like Grizzlies in the one. I'm still not sure on the other one. I kind of nibbled a little bit on the Lakers division right after the trade initially. It was feeling really good when they got Mark Williams, and then no Mark Williams. I don't know. Maybe they'll still get Mark Williams. We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think that's interesting. All right. Price the odds here or order them however you like. Most likely to win a playoff series this year. Give you 3 teams here. Houston Rockets, the LA Clippers, and Minnesota Timberwolves. Who's most likely to win a series this season?
So I did it with the Clippers as most likely, the Wolves as next most likely, and the Rockets as the least likely. I just think that if the Clippers have Kawhi and they're going to be and if they're healthy, I think that they have the highest ceiling out of those teams. I think that Minnesota, you've got Anthony Edwards, you've got your true 1A type of player on that roster, so I like them. And then with Houston, I voiced all my concerns with them before. I'm just not fully sold on this Houston Rockets team.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize I did it this way, but I kind of accidentally chose 3 teams that have a sort of similar format. And I think I purposely chose teams I'm a little skeptical on, but they're all sort of the same stylistic thing, which is not really that great of offense, but lots of defense. And we know in the regular season that wins you a bunch of games and probably gets you even above the play and into the playoffs. But in the playoffs, you got to play some offense. You got to score against some of these other great teams. So I think the answer probably, it comes back to matchup again. It's like, okay, which team of these 3 didn't play Oklahoma City or Denver or Memphis? There's one other matchup in the West. There's got to be 4 playoff matchups. Did one of them not play each other, or did 2 of them play each other here? Probably is the answer. You like Clippers best, Rockets least. All right, next one. Further down the list. Most likely to miss the play-in entirely. And probably one of these teams or more could do it. The Mavericks, the Suns, or the Warriors, who did not even make the play-in.
So I think the Suns missed the play-in. If I had to pick one of these teams, then I have Dallas, and then I have the Golden State Warriors. I just haven't really seen it with Phoenix this year. If Dallas, a lot of it depends on how much they can kind of float along without one of the bigs. I think that Kyrie Irving has been really good for them. Max Christie has been awesome for them. And I think they might have like just enough to be able to float around there. Plus they have a little bit of a lead on these other teams. Whereas Golden State, I like the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. I think that immediately raises their floor. And I think that they are the team that are probably going to be set in the play-in out of these three in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think I agree with that order on that one. All right. Next question. Question 4. Which West team do you think has the biggest delta from the regular season version of them to the postseason version?
So I think it's Memphis, just because they've limited their guys so much during the regular season. Obviously, we need to see it. We haven't totally seen it from Memphis in the playoffs yet over the past couple of seasons, but they're in a prime bounce back spot. They really didn't play much last year, right? And then this season, they've all kind of gelled together. They've looked exactly the way that we thought they were going to look. And I think that they have a lot more room to run if they're seeing their players play, like their best guys play 40 minutes instead of 30 minutes a night.
Yeah, I think my brain went the other way on this question. I think I go back to those teams we just talked about. I think teams like Houston and the Clippers maybe are my answer. Maybe not the Clippers. It depends on Kawhi. But those defense first regular season teams, maybe I'm just a pessimist by nature. I think folks on buckets would say so. But I just feel like there are teams, Houston in particular, I think is a team that because of youth and because of the lack of offense, I just am not ready to trust that team in any sort of postseason setting yet. So I think they'd be my answer more in the negative side. Memphis more on the positive side for you. All right, 2 left. This next one is kind of a part 1, part 2. So 3 left, whatever. All right, why, given everything we said about the Thunder and the historic metrics that they have and the fact that Chet is back now, who I think is their second best player and they should be even better with, why do I even need to do all the rest of this mess? Why don't I just bet OKC to win the title right now as the juggernaut?
I'm just not totally convinced that the number gets shorter, right? They're the clear number 1 seed in the West. I don't think that anybody's really going to be able to catch them. And maybe the number actually gets shorter if Boston goes crazy, right? Because Cleveland's kind of regressed a little bit lately. I think that Cleveland's still really good. And not to get into the East side of this, you can listen to that part of the catch up. But if Boston goes into a 1 seed, then maybe that impacts the futures market a little bit more, where they say, okay, well, now Boston has a better path to the 1. Boston has a better path to the finals that naturally has to damage what Oklahoma City could do. I also think that, I would be like, I think that they're pretty good. I think they're going to win pretty much any first round matchup. I think that their one matchup that's probably the worst for them is a healthy Dallas team because of the amount of bigs that they have. If you have Anthony Davis, Daniel Gafford, and maybe Derek Lively's able to play. I'm not sure if I don't think he got ruled out for the rest of the season, but that might be the combination of a team that's like, oh, like that's not a great matchup for us. But even then, like, I don't think the number is going to really move too much. I just don't see the need to buy it now when maybe it's only 15 cents shorter in 2 months. And I know for sure that this team is healthy going into the playoffs.
That makes sense. So it's not a no, it's a not yet. The NBA season is a marathon, not a sprint. Even for folks like me who are maybe ramping up out of the All-Star break, still a long way to go. There's always the injuries. As much as I'm happy to see Chet back on a court, let's keep seeing Chet back on a court. We need to see that hip injury and that whole thing is just gone for good too. So that makes sense. Flip side then, here's the second part of this question. It's the Western Conference Finals, and like last year, no Oklahoma City, no Denver. So, Joe Dellera, we get to the Western Conference Finals again, no Oklahoma City, no Denver. What happened?
I would be shocked if neither of these teams are in there. I was going to say you'd have to have a situation where where one of these teams like falls all the way down to the bottom of the standings. They play each other in the first round, and that's and then somebody bumps the other one. I think both of these teams are top notch. I think Denver's obviously the team that's more likely, I think, to not advance that far, and I think it just has to do with path. I think that they're more likely to see a tougher first round matchup, and then they're also much more likely to see a tougher second round matchup. So I think that's Denver's path out. And then I kind of outlined the one matchup I think that could be problematic for Oklahoma City is, a Dallas matchup. I don't think that any of the other teams that I think could be a real threat are going to fall all the way down to the 8 seed where they would play Oklahoma City. So maybe in the second round, but even then, those are going to be, I think, a lot longer series where, the 4-5 are going to have to play each other. That's going to be maybe a 7-game series. You're at a rest disadvantage. It's going to be very difficult, I think, to get Oklahoma City in a situation where they're getting upset.
I'm going to put you on the spot with a follow-up to that one before we get to our last question. Matt Moore loves to give out the exact bet outcomes, like the exact finals, the exact matchups. I don't think I've seen this market up, but let's assume that I gave you a market for Western Conference Finals teams to face each other. It's not Oklahoma City. It's not Denver. I don't have numbers for you. Nobody cares if you get it wrong. Only people remember the hero shot. Take your shot, Joe Dellera. Who are the two teams that are not Oklahoma City or Denver who is facing each other in the finals in the West?
Memphis and the Clippers.
Interesting. All right. There you heard it there first. Last question. I gave Jim this question too. You found a crystal ball that allows you to see the playoff future performance for any 3 West players of your choosing for this season. Who are your picks for the year?
Got to pick Luka Doncic. I need to know how this goes. I have to know. I have to see it. Because to me, if that combination works, they're going to be incredible, right? I then picked Chet Holmgren. I want to see how exactly Oklahoma City is deploying him. Is he going to be used as a 4? Is he going to be used as a 5? What do the numbers look like when he gets ramped up? How dominant is that defense down the stretch and in the playoffs as well? And then finally, Kawhi Leonard. Is he healthy? If so, the Clippers could really be a disruptor in the Western Conference. And that's one where if I knew he was going to be healthy, I could buy in the Clippers now. But instead, I think I'm just going to have to wait a couple months and make sure that he's good to go for the postseason and the playoff run.
Yeah, unfortunately in the West, if we could just use our crystal ball and health is really the thing that we'd want to use it for. To find out about Kawhi, find out about LeBron and Luka, find out about Anthony Davis, lots of these dudes, Chet Holmgren. Hopefully, we just get a playoffs that are healthy and we get to see a lot of these teams, but inevitably, probably going to see a couple injuries derail a couple of them. I think a non-injury one that I would like to see, and maybe this is just because I have like 700 units on him for most improved, I think J-Dub would be really fascinating to say, okay, I think I trust Shea now. Shea's going to do the thing in the playoffs. Shea's going to have his scoring. I trust their defense. I know Oklahoma City's going to defend well, but I still don't think you win the title with an elite defense and an elite score. You need a second guy, somebody. I'm not going to call him the Jaylen Brown. That's not how the Celtics work. But the thing that you listener think is the Jaylen Brown. You need the second star. And I really felt going into the summer last year, after the postseason, I really wasn't in on J-Dub. I really felt like he let them down in the playoffs and could not be the second guy. And I don't think it's Chet. I don't think Chet is supposed to be that dude as a scorer. I think J-Dub, to me, is a really good barometer test of, okay, what actually did Oklahoma City become? Could he be the Scottie Pippen to the Michael Jordan version that might be Shea on this sort of juggernaut defensive team? To me, that's a question that helps me find out, do I actually want to invest in OKC? I think it's a question OKC has to find out, because if they find out the answer to that is not the answer they want it to be, I think they have to make a move this summer. I think they have to decide, okay, this version's not getting there. As good as we look, Shea, yes, Chet, yes, it might have to be not J-Dub if he hasn't actually taken the steps forward or look like there is another step there, especially he's not as young as you think for a younger player too, just because he had a few years in college. So to me, I think J-Dub would be a really fascinating, just kind of temperature gauge of what we might actually see from OKC, but there are other names up and down the list. We'll talk about all of them over at Buckets in the days and weeks and months to come. The marathon has only just begun. We got a long ways to go. That's it for our 2-part NBA midseason update. Thank you to Joe Dellera for all things West today. Thanks to Jim Turvey for part 1 on the East. Make sure to go back and listen to that in your Buckets feed or Action Network feed. It's in both places. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, subscribe on the Action Network YouTube channel as well. Don't forget to download and check out everything in the Action Network app. Follow Joe at Joe Dellera. You get all the daily props and picks. Make sure to get that pro subscription so you get the alerts right away. Check out the Discord, link in the description. You can join there and see a lot of folks talking about picks there as well. And most importantly, follow us at Buckets, daily best bets, that future Jays we referenced every Monday coming to you. Plenty more all week, every day, all the way into the end of June when we get to finally, an NBA champion. It's coming. We're getting there. It's time to watch some basketball. Joe, let's get buckets.